She was raised to fear them. He was left to die in the woods. But when their paths crossed under a pale moon, her decision changed everything. And what followed shook an entire town. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The scorching Texas sun beat down on the small frontier town of Willow Creek in the summer of 1873. Clara Matthews wiped the sweat from her brow as she organized the medical supplies in her father's clinic. At 24, she had become the town's unofficial nurse after her father taught her everything he knew about medicine. "Clara, I need your help with Mrs. Wilson's delivery tonight," Dr. Matthews said as he entered the clinic, his medical bag in hand. "Of course, Father. I've prepared everything we might need," she replied, gesturing to the neatly arranged instruments and clean linens. The sound of galloping horses and shouting interrupted their conversation. Clara rushed to the window to see a group of men riding into town. One of them slumped over his horse, clearly injured. "Comanche attack at the Miller Ranch," shouted Sheriff Dawson as the men dismounted. "We drove them back, but they got Samuel. With an arrow, Doc, we need you." Clara's heart raced as she helped her father prepare for the incoming patient. Samuel Miller was barely 20, the youngest son of one of the most prominent families in town. As they carried him in, Clara could see the arrow protruding from his chest, blood soaking his shirt. "The damned savages ambushed us," growled Samuel's father, Jeremiah Miller, his hands clenched into fists. "We shot one of them, though. Left him to die in the woods where he belongs." Clara flinched at his words, but remained focused on assisting her father with Samuel's treatment. The young man's face was ashen, his breathing labored as Dr. Matthews carefully examined the wound. "The arrow's deep, but I think we can save him," Dr. Matthews muttered, his experienced hands already working to stabilize the injured man. Hours later, after successfully removing the arrow and treating the wound, Clara stepped outside for fresh air. The night was cool, a blessed relief from the day's heat. Stars glittered overhead as she leaned against the porch rail, her mind troubled. She had grown up hearing stories about Comanche raids, had been taught to fear them, but something about Jeremiah Miller's words haunted her. A wounded man left alone in the woods to die, regardless of who he was, went against everything her father had taught her about the sanctity of human life. "You look troubled, Clara," said a voice behind her. She turned to see Thomas Parker, the town's young schoolteacher who had been courting her for months. "I was just thinking about what Mr. Miller said, about the wounded Comanche warrior they left behind," she admitted. Thomas's expression hardened. "You can't possibly be concerned about one of them. They've killed dozens of settlers. They're savages, Clara." "They're people, Thomas," she countered, her voice quiet but firm. "And my father taught me that all life is precious." "Your father treats white folks, Clara, not Indians who'd scalp you as soon as look at you," Thomas replied sharply. Clara didn't respond, but as Thomas bid her good night and walked away, she made a decision that would change her life forever. In the pale moonlight, she gathered medical supplies, mounted her horse, and rode toward the Miller Ranch, determined to find the wounded warrior. The woods were dark and foreboding as Clara dismounted and tied her horse to a tree, guided only by her small lantern. She searched the area where the confrontation had reportedly taken place. After an hour of searching, she almost gave up, until she heard a faint groan coming from behind a thicket of bushes. There, lying against a fallen log, was a Comanche warrior, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his side. He couldn't have been much older than her, his face contorted in pain, his dark eyes flashing with fear and defiance as she approached. "I'm here to help you," Clara said softly, knowing he probably didn't understand her words, but hoping her tone would convey her intentions. The warrior watched her warily, his hand moving to a knife at his belt, but he was too weak to pose any real threat. Clara moved slowly, showing him her medical supplies, and to her surprise, he eventually allowed her to examine his wound. The bullet had entered his side, and though the wound was serious, it wasn't immediately fatal. Using the skills her father had taught her, Clara cleaned the wound, applied a poultice to prevent infection, and bandaged it securely. Throughout her ministrations, the warrior observed her with intense curiosity, occasionally grimacing in pain, but never making a sound. When she finished, he spoke a single word in his language, then repeated it in broken English. "Why?" Clara paused, considering her answer. "Because you're a person in need of help. That's all I need to know." As dawn approached, Clara knew she had to return to town before her absence was discovered. She left the warrior with water, food, and additional bandages, unsure if he would survive, but knowing she had done what she could. "I'll come back tomorrow night," she promised, though she wasn't sure if he understood. As she mounted her horse and rode back toward Willow Creek, Clara knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. If anyone discovered what she had done, she would be considered a traitor to her people. But in her heart, she knew she had done the right thing. For 3 nights, Clara returned to the woods, bringing fresh bandages, food, and water to the wounded Comanche warrior. Each night, she found him a little stronger, a little more alert. On the 4th night, she arrived to find him sitting upright, his back against a tree, whittling a small piece of wood with his knife. "You're looking better," she said, kneeling beside him to check his wound. The warrior watched her hands as she unwrapped the bandage, his dark eyes tracking her every movement. "Medicine." "Woman," he said in halting English, surprising her. "You speak English?" Clara asked, looking up at him. "Some," he replied. "Learned from Trader many seasons ago." "My name is Clara," she said, placing a hand on her chest. He hesitated, then mirrored her gesture. "Tab." As she redressed his wound, Clara noticed it was healing well, with no signs of infection. "You're strong," she commented. "Most men would still be bedridden with such an injury." "Comanche, not weak like white men," Tab said, a hint of pride in his voice. Clara couldn't help but smile. "My patient in town might disagree with you. He's recovering quite well from an arrow wound." Tabe's expression darkened. "He killed my brother, I saw." Clara's hands stilled. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. Why you help enemy?" Tab asked, genuine confusion in his eyes. Clara considered her answer carefully. "My father is a healer. He taught me that all life has value. White, Comanche. It doesn't matter. Suffering is suffering." Tab was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if searching for deceit. Finally, he nodded once, seeming to accept her words. As Clara prepared to leave, Tab suddenly grabbed her wrist. She tensed, but his grip was not threatening. "Danger for you," he said solemnly, "if your people know." "I know," she replied, gently extracting her hand from his grasp. "But I couldn't just let you die." Back in town, tensions were running high. More settlers had arrived with tales of Comanche raids on neighboring settlements. The saloon buzzed with angry talk of organizing a militia to hunt down the savages once and for all. Clara tried to avoid such conversations, focusing instead on her duties at the clinic. Samuel Miller was recovering well, though he seemed haunted by the attack. One afternoon, as she changed his bandages, he confided in her. "I keep seeing their faces," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The Indians we shot. One of them was just a boy, not much younger than me." Clara's heart ached for him. "War makes victims of everyone involved, Samuel. My pa says they're animals, that killing them is no different than shooting wolves." Samuel continued, his eyes troubled. "But they didn't look like animals to me. They looked scared, just like I was." Before Clara could respond, the clinic door burst open, and Jeremiah Miller strode in, his face like thunder. "What poison are you filling my boy's head with, girl?" he demanded. "I was just changing his bandages, Mr. Miller," Clara replied evenly, though her heart raced. Sheriff Dawson says someone's been stealing medical supplies, Miller said. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Clara kept her expression neutral. We use a lot of supplies here at the clinic, Mr. Miller. Perhaps the sheriff is mistaken. Perhaps, Miller replied, clearly unconvinced. Just remember where your loyalty should lie, Miss Matthews. This town has been good to your family. After Miller left, Clara's father entered from the back room, his expression grave. Clara, is there something you need to tell me? He asked. Quietly for a moment, Clara considered confessing everything, but fear held her tongue. No, father, nothing at all. That night, as Clara prepared to make her now routine visit to the woods, Thomas Parker intercepted her as she saddled her horse. Behind the clinic. Going somewhere at this hour? He asked, his voice cold. Clara's blood froze, but she maintained her composure. Mrs. Peterson is in labor. Father asked me to check on her. That's strange, Thomas replied, stepping closer. Because I just saw your father heading to the Peterson farm himself, not 10 minutes ago. Clara's mind raced for another explanation, but Thomas continued before she could speak. People are talking, Clara, about missing supplies. About your strange behavior. About your defense of the Comanche. His voice lowered to a dangerous whisper. Tell me you haven't done anything foolish. What I do is my business, Thomas, Clara replied, lifting her chin defiantly. Thomas's face hardened. Not when it concerns the safety of this town. If you're helping one of them ... Then what? Clara challenged. Would you have me arrested? Hanged as a traitor? I would have you come to your senses, Thomas hissed. Whatever misguided notion of charity has possessed you, forget it. Those people are enemies. They've killed our friends, our neighbors. And we've killed theirs, Clara retorted. The cycle never ends because no one is willing to show mercy. Thomas stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head sadly. I won't tell anyone about tonight, Clara, but if you write out those gates, don't expect me to protect you if the truth comes out. Clara mounted her horse, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken. I never asked for your protection, Thomas. Only your understanding. As she rode toward the woods, Clara knew she was risking everything, her reputation, her place in the community, perhaps even her life. But something deeper than fear drove her forward, a conviction that what she was doing was right, despite what everyone around her believed. When she reached the clearing where Tob had been recovering, Clara found it empty. Panic seized her, until she noticed a trail of disturbed undergrowth leading deeper into the forest. Following it cautiously, she eventually heard soft singing in a language she didn't understand. She found Tob by a small stream, bathing his wound in the cool water, singing what sounded like a prayer or healing chant. He stopped abruptly when he sensed her presence, reaching for his knife. It's just me, Clara said, stepping into the moonlight. Tob relaxed slightly but remained alert. You come again, after many suns. I was delayed, Clara explained, approaching him with fresh supplies. The town is ... suspicious. It's becoming dangerous for me to visit you. Then why come? Tob asked, genuine curiosity in his expression. Clara smiled sadly as she knelt beside him. Because sometimes doing what's right isn't the same as doing what's safe. The summer heat intensified as July progressed, bringing with it a tension that hung over Willow Creek like a thundercloud. Clara continued her clandestine visits to Tabe, though with greater caution. The Comanche warrior was now strong enough to hunt small game and move deeper into the forest, away from potential discovery by hunting parties from town. During their meetings, they began to share more about their lives. Clara spoke of her mother's death from fever when she was 12, and how it had inspired her to learn healing arts from her father. Tav had told her of his people's struggles as white settlers encroached further onto their traditional hunting grounds, forcing them into increasingly desperate raids for food and supplies. My father was great warrior, Tob explained one evening as they sat beside a small, carefully concealed fire. He teach me honor in battle, never harm women, children. But white soldiers not same. They attack our camp, kill many women, many children. Clara listened, her heart heavy. Not all white people are the same, just as not all Comanche are the same, she offered. Tob nodded slowly. You different, good heart. He paused, studying her face in the firelight. Why you not afraid of me? First night, you come alone. I could kill you. I was afraid, Clara admitted. But fear shouldn't stop us from doing what's right. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Clara quickly extinguished the fire while Tob gathered his few possessions. You must go, he urged, already melting into the shadows of the forest. I'll return tomorrow, Clara whispered, but Tob grabbed her arm. No, too dangerous now. White men hunt Comanche. Hunt you too, if they know. His eyes, usually guarded, were now filled with genuine concern. I go to my people soon. Wound heal enough. Clara felt an unexpected pang at the thought of never seeing him again. Over these weeks, she had come to respect Tob, to see him as a friend rather than the fearsome savage she had been raised to dread. Wait, she said, reaching into her bag. Take these. She handed him several packets of medicinal herbs and clean bandages. For your wound and for your people if they need them. Tob accepted the gifts, then surprised her by removing a leather cord from around his neck. Hanging from it was a small carved eagle, meticulously detailed. For protection, he said, placing it in her palm and closing her fingers around it. Eagle, see danger coming. Before Clara could respond, he vanished into the darkness. She clutched the carved eagle tightly as she mounted her horse and rode back toward town, a strange mixture of relief and sadness washing over her upon reaching Willow Creek. Clara immediately sensed something was wrong. Despite the late hour, many buildings were illuminated, and she could hear raised voices coming from the direction of the town hall. Tying her horse behind the clinic, she slipped inside, hoping to avoid notice. Clara Matthews. Her father's voice cut through the darkness of the clinic. He stood in the doorway to their living quarters, a lamp in his hand, his face grave. Where have you been? I was gathering herbs by the creek, she lied, avoiding his gaze. The wild sage is in bloom. Dr. Matthews set the lamp down and approached. His daughter, his expression softening. Clara, whatever you're involved in, you need to tell me now. The town council is meeting tonight. Sheriff Dawson has organized a search party for tomorrow. A search party? For what? Clara asked, though dread was already settling in her stomach. Not what, who? Her father's voice was barely above a whisper. Thomas Parker came forward this evening. He claims you've been helping a wounded Comanche warrior. He says he followed you several nights ago. Clara's blood ran cold. She had been so careful, but obviously not careful enough. Father, is it true? Dr. Matthews interrupted, his eyes searching her face. Clara straightened her spine, suddenly resolute. Yes, I found him wounded in the woods. I couldn't let him die. Her father closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. Do you have any idea what you've done? This town has suffered at the hands of Comanche raiders. Families have lost loved ones. If they discover you've been aiding the enemy... He's not the enemy, Father. He's a man wounded and alone, Clara argued. You taught me that a healer's duty is to all who suffer, regardless of who they are. I taught you to use common sense as well. Dr. Matthews exclaimed, running a hand through his graying hair. Clara, these men are out for blood. The Miller boy's wound, the attacks on neighboring settlements, they're looking for someone to blame. And I'll be their scapegoat. Clara finished quietly. You need to deny everything, her father urged. Say Thomas was mistaken, that you were gathering herbs or attending to a patient. Clara fingered the carved eagle in her pocket, thinking of Tabe's words about honor and courage. I won't lie, Father. What I did was right, even if no one else can see it. Dr. Matthews stared at his daughter for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're as stubborn as your mother was. His voice held equal measures of pride and resignation. Then we must prepare for what's coming. The next morning, Clara stood before the town council in the small courthouse, facing the accusing stares of men who had known her all her life. Thomas Parker wouldn't meet her eyes as he recounted how he had followed her into the woods and observed her treating a Comanche warrior's wounds. Miss Matthews, Mayor Wilson addressed her, his tone formal but his eyes cold. Do you deny these allegations? Clara looked around the room at the faces filled with anger, betrayal, and in some cases, pure hatred. Her father stood in the back, his expression supportive despite his concern. Taking a deep breath, she spoke clearly. I do not deny them. I found a wounded man in the woods, and I treated his injuries. I would do the same for any of you. The room erupted in shouts and curses. Sheriff Dawson had to fire his pistol into the ceiling to restore order. That man is part of a tribe that has murdered our people, Jeremiah Miller bellowed, his face red with fury. You've committed treason against this town. I've committed to the principles of human decency, Clara countered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And I won't apologize for that. Mayor Wilson cleared his throat. Miss Matthews, your actions have put this entire community at risk. This savage could bring his people back to attack us. Using the information you've provided about our defenses. I provided no information, Clara said firmly. I treated his wound, nothing more. And where is this Indian now? Sheriff Dawson demanded. I don't know, Clara answered truthfully. He was well enough to leave several days ago. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, growing increasingly hostile. Some council members called for Clara to be banished from Willow Creek. Others suggested more severe punishments. Finally, Mayor Wilson raised his hand for silence. The council will deliberate on this matter. Until we reach a decision, Miss Matthews will remain under house arrest. Sheriff, please escort her home. As Sheriff Dawson led her from the courthouse, Clara caught sight of young Samuel Miller standing at the edge of the crowd, his expression troubled. When their eyes met, he gave her an almost imperceptible nod, a small gesture of understanding amid the sea of condemnation. Back at the clinic, Clara sat by the window, watching as groups of armed men gathered in the town square, preparing to hunt for signs of Comanche in the surrounding area. Her father moved about the room, occasionally placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I want you to know that I'm proud of you, Clara. Your mother would be too. Clara smiled weakly, grateful for his support, but unable to shake the dread that had settled over her. As the sun began to set, she noticed a lone rider galloping into town, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. Comanche! The man shouted as he dismounted in the town square. Comanche warriors spotted at the North Ridge, at least 24 of them. The town erupted into chaos. Men grabbed rifles and ammunition, women gathered children into homes, and Sheriff Dawson began organizing defensive positions. Clara watched in horror, wondering if Tab was among the approaching warriors, if her actions had somehow led to this moment. I need to find out what's happening, she told her father, moving toward the door. Clara, you're under house arrest, Dr. Matthews reminded her, though his tone lacked conviction. And the town might need every healer it has before. The night is through, she countered, already reaching for her medical bag. Her father hesitated, then nodded grimly. Stay close to me. Together, they stepped out into the growing darkness, into a town preparing for battle, unaware that the night would bring revelations none of them could have anticipated. Willow Creek transformed into an armed camp as the sun dipped below the horizon. Men with rifles took positions behind water troughs, in second-story windows, and behind hastily constructed barricades. Women loaded spare weapons and prepared. Bandages, their faces tight with fear and determination. Clara and her father set up a temporary medical station in the town hall, laying out instruments and medicines in grim preparation for casualties. Sheriff Dawson posted 2 deputies at the doors, ostensibly to protect the medical staff, but Clara knew they were also there to ensure she didn't escape. "They've been spotted crossing the north pasture," a breathless young man reported, rushing into the town hall. "Sheriff says they'll be here within the hour." "How many?" Dr. Matthews asked, his voice steady despite the tension. "Maybe 30 warriors, all mounted and armed." Clara's stomach twisted with anxiety. If Tob was among them, had she been used? Had her acts of kindness somehow enabled this attack? The doubt gnawed at her as she arranged clean bandages in neat rows. As darkness fell completely, an eerie silence descended over Willow Creek. Clara could hear her own heartbeat as she peered through the town hall window at the empty main street, illuminated only by the soft glow of lanterns and a half-moon overhead. The first indication of the Comanche approach was the distant thunder of hoofbeats, growing steadily louder. Men tensed behind their makeshift fortifications, rifle barrels glinting in the moonlight as they took aim at the northern edge of town. "Hold your fire until I give the order," Sheriff Dawson called out, his voice carrying in the still night air. "Let's see what they want first." The riders emerged from the darkness, a line of mounted warriors silhouetted against the night sky as they halted just beyond rifle range. One warrior separated from the group, riding forward slowly with his hands raised to show he carried no weapon. "That's a parley sign," Dr. Matthews murmured. "They want to talk." Sheriff Dawson and Mayor Wilson cautiously moved to meet the lone rider in the middle of the street. Clara strained to see if the warrior was Tobby, but the distance and darkness made it impossible to distinguish his features. After several minutes of conversation, Sheriff Dawson turned and walked briskly back toward the town hall, his expression unreadable. He pushed through the doors and fixed his gaze on Clara. "Miss Matthews, your presence is requested," he said curtly. "My daughter stays right here," Dr. Matthews protested, stepping forward protectively. "It wasn't a request from me." "Doc," the sheriff replied. "Their spokesman asked for her specifically. Says they're not here to attack. They're here to negotiate." Clara's pulse quickened. "Negotiate what?" "A peace treaty," Sheriff Dawson said, sounding as surprised by the words as everyone else in the room looked. "They want to establish a formal boundary and trading agreement with Willow Creek and the surrounding settlements." Whispers erupted around them as Clara followed the sheriff outside. As they approached the meeting point, she recognized the warrior, who had ridden forward, not Tobby, but an older man with gray streaks in his long hair and deep lines etched into his weathered face. "This is Clara Matthews," Sheriff Dawson introduced her, his hand never straying far from his holstered pistol. Older warrior studied her intently before speaking in broken but clear English. "I am Chief Many Horses. My son Tob tells me you have good heart. Save his life when your people would let him die." Clara's eyes widened in surprise. "Tob is your son?" The chief nodded solemnly. "He returned to us. Tell story of woman healer, with golden hair and hands that bring life instead of death." He gestured to the warriors behind him. "We come not for war. Come for peace." Mayor Wilson stepped forward, skepticism evident in his stance. "You expect us to believe that? After years of raiding our settlements?" "Raids happen when hunger comes," Chief Many Horses explained. "When white men kill buffalo, push us from hunting grounds." He paused, his eyes moving from the mayor to Clara. "But woman who save enemy in darkness showed different path possible." Clara felt the weight of everyone's gaze upon her as the significance of the chief's words sank in. Her small act of compassion had somehow created an opening, a moment where two peoples locked in hatred might glimpse another possibility. "What exactly are you proposing?" Mayor Wilson asked, his tone still wary but less hostile. Land north of creek for Comanche. Land south for white settlers. No crossing with weapons. Trading post at creek for both peoples. Fair trade, no stealing. No killing. It was a simple proposal, but revolutionary in its implications. Clara watched as Mayor Wilson and Sheriff Dawson exchanged uncertain glances. "We'd need to discuss this with the town council," the mayor hedged. "And with representatives from other settlements." Chief Many Horses nodded. "We wait 3 days, then return for answer." He turned to Clara. "You speak for your people. You understand Comanche not all bad, not all good, same as white man." Before Clara could respond, a shot rang out from somewhere behind her. People scattered for cover as Chief Many Horses' horse reared, though the chief himself appeared unharmed. Clara turned to see Jeremiah Miller lowering his rifle, his face twisted. With rage, no deals with savages. He shouted, raising his weapon for another shot. In the chaos that followed, Clara acted without thinking. She ran forward, placing herself between Miller's rifle and the Comanche chief. "Stop this!" she cried out. "Haven't we seen enough bloodshed?" Miller's finger hovered over the trigger, his eyes wild with grief and hatred. "They killed my brother last summer. They put an arrow in my boy's chest. And you want peace with them?" "Your boy is alive because of medicine," Clara replied, not moving from her protective stance. "Not because of more killing. When does it end, Mr. Miller? When every Comanche is dead? Or when every settler is dead? Or can it end here tonight, with us choosing something different?" For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, unexpectedly, Samuel Miller emerged from the crowd and placed his hand on his father's rifle, gently pushing it downward. "Pa, she's right," he said quietly. "I don't want to live my whole life fighting. I don't want my children to live that way either." Jeremiah Miller's hands trembled as he lowered his weapon, tears streaming down his weathered face. The tension in the air slowly dissipated as Sheriff Dawson took control of the situation, ordering everyone to stand down. In the days that followed, representatives from Willow Creek and neighboring settlements met with Chief Many Horses and his council to negotiate terms of coexistence. It wasn't easy. Generations of mistrust and bloodshed couldn't be erased in a few meetings, but it was a beginning. Clara found herself in the unexpected position of mediator, trusted by both sides to translate not just words but intentions. Thomas Parker avoided her at first, but eventually approached her outside the negotiations. "I was wrong about you," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "When I reported what you were doing, I thought I was protecting the town. I never imagined ... that saving one life could save many more." Clara finished for him. "Neither did I, Thomas. I just knew I couldn't let someone die if I had the power to help them." On the final day of negotiations, as both parties prepared to sign the treaty that would establish boundaries, trading protocols, and mutual protection agreements, Tob sought Clara out. He looked healthy and strong, dressed in ceremonial attire as befitted the son of a chief. "You wear my carving," he noted, gesturing to the eagle pendant that hung around her neck. Clara touched it reflexively. "It brought me protection, just as you said it would." Tav smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Eagle carving not have magic. The person who wear it have courage, have good heart. That is real protection. Will you return to the trading post?" "Sometimes?" Clara asked. "As part of the delegation?" "Yes," Tav confirmed. "My father say I learn white man ways, to help my people in times ahead." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps you teach me more about healing plants. I teach you Comanche ways." "I'd like that," Clara replied, smiling as she watched Tab rejoin his people. Clara reflected on how a single moment of compassion in the darkness had led to this unprecedented day of hope. The path ahead would not be easy, there would be Setbacks, violations of trust on both sides, and those who preferred the old ways of hatred. But something had shifted in Willow Creek and in the hearts of many who lived there. That evening, as the Comanche delegation departed northward and the townspeople dispersed to their homes, Clara stood with her father on the clinic porch, watching the setting sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "You know, I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, Dr. Matthews said, his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "But I think you may have saved more lives with your actions these past weeks than I have in my entire career." Clara leaned against her father, the carved eagle warm against her skin, a reminder that courage often came in the most unexpected moments of choice. "I just did what you taught me," she replied softly. "That healing isn't just about mending bodies. Sometimes it's about mending divisions that run much deeper." As darkness settled over Willow Creek, Clara Matthews looked toward the northern horizon, where stars were beginning to appear, the same stars that shone over Comanche camps and settler homesteads alike. For the first time in her memory, they seemed to promise something new, not just survival, but the possibility of a different kind of future, built on the radical notion that compassion might be stronger than fear.